TikTok is officially banned come January 19th. OpenAI has changed video forever. Gronk is now free to everyone. Instagram is letting us test Reels. And X is out to crush small creators' dreams. This is the Act 18 show. Hey, I'm Jason, faith-based entrepreneur, marketing geek. Timestamps and sources below, along with a link to today's sponsor, our funnel launch kit. It has our top performing funnel pages, landing pages, sales pages, and even an email sequence and course framework to help you go from idea to sales in just a few days using 100% free software. You can check that out via the link in the description and cards. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the most exciting story of the week. It's not going to be TikTok. I mean, TikTok is important, but it's not exactly exciting. A bunch of legal jargon, right? But what is exciting is OpenAI's new Sora model. So essentially, this is going to allow us to create our own videos with just a couple lines of text. And as you can see from this footage, this is from MKBHD's channel. I personally don't have access to this yet in my Plus account. But if you are paying for GPT, over the next couple of weeks, you should get access to this. If you're on the Plus plan, that's $20 a month. You're going to be able to generate up to 50 videos at 480p. If you're on the Pro plan, you can do a heck of a lot more because you're giving OpenAI $200 a month. Now, do I think this is worth $200 a month when you compare it to the cost of what you might pay for a stock footage website? No. Definitely not. So I wouldn't upgrade just for that. And I think Envato elements and story blocks and even what Canva gives you, I think are all good enough when it comes to content creation. And this is more just a sign of if you are paying for a stock media service, you probably don't want to renew unless there's one asterisk there. But essentially, you can, as they said on their website, OpenAI's website, you can generate up to 50 videos 480p or fewer at 720p. What does fewer mean? I don't know. I think they're being nebulous on purpose because the cost of generating these videos just from a server and energy perspective must be enormous, which is why if you want to go full 1080, you have to be on that $200 a month price plan. And so I think the only real question here as creators is not if you should use this. I think it's going to be when you should use this. And so looking at the footage MKBHD brought out, and I'm going to use his footage instead of, what the OpenAI gives us, because OpenAI always gives you like the best of the best and they don't show any of the errors. But one of the errors that he found was when it comes to actual animal movements, any living thing, you kind of quickly start to see that it doesn't exactly look natural. So that's why I'm thinking that this isn't necessarily going to replace stock footage, but as long as you don't have a living thing or you do it animated, you're probably going to be able to get away with using this service moving forward. And so I really do think, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here, but I do think that this is going to dramatically change the landscape of stock image websites, but also stock video websites. Just as an example, on our channel, if I'm not making a diagram, I probably just use either Canva Dreamlab, Gronk AI, or GPT, or Claude, because I do have access to all three. I'll use one of those to create the image, and one of those four will kind of get it right. It will be close enough where I'm not going to go to Shutterstock and pay them $20 just for one image I can use like 3 times, right? So I think this signals a giant shift in terms of the media landscape of us as solo creators being able to create a lot more engaging content. However, we do have to think about who we're creating content for and if they're going to care. And I think that's a good question and thing to consider when it comes to how we create and use these stock images and these stock videos. And so while I think it is really cool that we can just, with a couple keystrokes, we can get some awesome looking video and B-roll. I did stop it because I don't want to get copyright striked, but you can check out his channel if you want to see his full breakdown. He has a lot more footage. But I think the bottom line is yes, this is going to change things. No, you should not renew any of your, video stock footage subscriptions if you have any. And I think this is just going to get better and better. And as long as we don't try and make the AI outputs look like real footage, then I think for the most part, viewers just aren't going to care, because viewers are coming to you for your knowledge or your experience or whatever it is that you are, whatever type of content that you're talking about. And even B-rolls, like everybody knows, oh, he didn't film that, or she didn't actually take a picture of that. That's stock footage, right? And for the most part, people are okay with that because it just enhances whatever your storytelling or whatever your tutorial is. And so as long as it's seen as an enhancement, I think it's okay. Now, on the subject of AI, while Sora is going to cost quite a bit of money and take a while for it to trickle down to the $20 a month price plan, well, it will be on the $20 a month price plan, just at a level that is usable. We have Elon Musk making Gronk free for everyone. Of course, there is a little asterisk here. There is a limitation on how many messages you can send. So the limit is 10 messages every 2 hours. And I think this is just trying to get people's feet wet with AI. And then hopefully they look at that and go, okay, well, actually this is kind of helpful to what I'm working on or what I'm doing. So I will pay, the $16 a month. Although given how long AI has already been out, I'd be surprised that if any power user would have not already purchased it by now, right? I would say this is pretty much for the late adopters or super casual users, right? So, I mean, GPT has a free version, right? And with X having a free version there, I think this is more of just a way to try and get people to stay on the X platform itself. Because, let's be real, if you haven't tested AI for helping you with your job by now, you probably are either in a job where it just doesn't work for you at all, or you're not allowed to use it for your job for some reason, right? Because a lot of companies are concerned about proprietary information to these platforms. And so I think this is more of a strategy to increase engagement with X in general, as opposed to actually getting, subscribers, because I really do think anyone who really enjoys using AI or has found that AI really does help with a lot of what we do, then they're probably already paying for one. And I don't see someone leaving GPT or Claude and going to Gronk. I've been playing with all three. And when it comes to just writing in general, Gronk is still a distant third place. I tried using Gronk actually for the first story in this particular episode, and it took me twice as long to write. By the time I was done, I was like, I should have just written this myself. But when it comes to GPT and its memory of my writing style, it does a whole lot better. So I think this is a good opportunity to just kind of test out Gronk to see how it compares to whatever AI you're already using. And Gronk does an excellent job when it comes to actually sourcing current news things. But when it comes to kind of the more heavy lifting, the analysis or creative, I think the other two models do a lot better. That's Claude and GPT, mostly because you can directly upload Excel files or a 100-page document to GPT, and it will actually read it, and you can actually talk to it about it, whereas Gronk hasn't reached that point yet. So for the most part, I see this just as a big engagement incentive to try and get more people to stay on X, and I don't think it's a good thing if this just turns into everyone uses Gronk to create their tweets, right? I don't think that's going to make X a better platform in the long run. And so that's it for X. We'll talk about it more when it comes to their crushing of small creators' dreams. Now, Meta is facing an antitrust lawsuit that unfortunately was greenlit in the UK. And of course, they're looking for $2.1 billion in damages. I don't know. When I first started this show, I saw here and there, okay, this company gets billed here, company gets billed there, or fined here and fined there. But man, I think we should start having a tracker for how much revenue tech companies lose just by being sued for stuff that they technically didn't do wrong. And I know it's not a popular opinion, oh, well, Meta and Facebook, they collect all our data and they're mean. Right. but they pay lawyers hundreds, if not millions of dollars a year to write their terms of service. Their terms of service is very clear. You use our platform, we get to use your data. It's a free thing, right? But in this particular instance, the antitrust aspect is the argument that Facebook is so big, there's no other option. And so saying, hey, you can use Facebook for free, but we're allowed to use your data is not a fair contract, because if someone decides not to use Facebook, then they don't have an alternative. I think this is silly. If you have friends, they have a phone number, they have an email address. So if you want to talk to them, just pick up your phone and I don't know, actually call them, actually text them. So I think this whole argument of somehow you're going to be socially ostracized because you don't use Facebook is ridiculous. I also find it absurd that they're saying that this suit is on part of 46 million UK users, and it's an automatic opt-in. So this antitrust lawsuit is able to say we're 46 million strong, and I would bet you not even half of those 46 million people know that this is a thing or even care. So I think this is just another example of governments looking backwards and saying, it technically wasn't wrong when you did it back there, but now that we understand the social implications and how you're using the data, even though you told people that, and even though they knew that, and even though common sense says, hey, I'm uploading a picture to a free platform, of course it's going to be seen and used. I just think that these kinds of lawsuits are getting out of hand. It's getting ridiculous, and all it's going to do is stifle creativity, and it's just going to make it harder to grow on these platforms as well, as they are asked to essentially have more and more of their revenue stream stripped away. Because if Facebook is not allowed to track its users by default, it can't make money, in which case it has to charge users. So we either wind up paying, $16 a month for X, and then $10 a month for Facebook, and $20 a month for Instagram, and now we're just back to essentially cable and streaming, or we just accept the fact that when you're on a platform and you're using it for free, they get to use your data. The other problem or aspect to this story, I forgot to include it here, is there's a lot of complaining of the Facebook pixel, right? Where if you go to a website, they have a Facebook pixel on their site, and they send that data back to Facebook, even though every website has in their privacy policy, hey, we have tracking pixels on our site and we use it to run advertising. And so I think this attack on the advertising model in general, and the attitude that all these platforms just have to pay billions upon billions of dollars for doing something that wasn't actually illegal in the first place, is just not a good way to go. So I will keep you updated as the story progresses, but I really do hope it does not go through, because it's a really bad precedent for how things are progressing when it comes to regulation of big platforms. Now, speaking of regulation of big platforms, just a quick, if you've ever been in Facebook jail, apparently now there's a way to re-educate yourself to get out. So I think this is part of their shift in how they're doing content moderation across their portfolio of platforms. But, if you've ever gotten a speeding ticket, you have the option of just paying it, or you can go to traffic school and you can get it reduced. Man, traffic school was so boring. I had to do that a couple times. I'll admit it. Essentially, Facebook is offering us the same thing. If you mess up, then you can go educate yourself on how to properly think on Facebook, and then they'll let you escape Facebook jail, and you won't get a content strike. At least you can sidestep the content strike, but I think by this point most people are clear on what Facebook does and does not like on their platform. So I don't think that this is actually going to be much of a big change. Now, unlike Australia, who just decided to ban social media for everyone under the age of 16, irrespective of what the content is, the US is trying to take a different approach that is still in the wrong direction. So the Kids Online Safety Act is essentially designed to protect children from seeing content that the government doesn't think they should see, which on the surface sounds good. Okay, yeah, let's protect kids. But then the duty of care clause that's in there somewhere in this, giant document that nobody actually reads, essentially puts that responsibility on social media platforms. And of course, left and right are starting to scream at the top of their lungs, that's censorship, which I guess it is. That is the definition of censorship, saying if you are this person, you're not allowed to see this content, right? Now, I totally get it. There is a legitimate case for protecting children. We do need to protect children. And we also need to allow people to see and say what they want to see and say. And so the most concerning part of this particular story that I didn't want to spend too much time on because it's just kind of stalled out, is this quote from the Speaker of the House when he says, "When you're dealing with the regulation of free speech, you can't have it go too far and be overboard." There's so much wrong with this sentence, but let's just start with when you're dealing with the regulation of free speech. I've never heard, well, I have. Let's not be hyperbolic, but that's just an oxymoron. The regulation of free speech. That right there should mean that this bill should just be killed. I totally get that there are legitimate concerns. Kids are being exposed to things they shouldn't. They're seeing things they shouldn't. And this kind of reminds me of the time when my parents finally bought cable. I was like in my teens and I was flipping through channels late at night and oh, wow, there was no parental controls on that. And I remember my dad quickly went through and literally had to ask the cable company to remove different channels because there was no way to, stop kids who came over from watching those channels, right? So this is a problem on all types of media. It's not just social. And there needs to be things and ways to protect children from accidentally seeing those things. At the same time, at a certain point, we have to say, yeah, it's the parent's responsibility. And so when you have government officials saying, dealing with the regulation of free speech, we should all just say no, because while it is important, whatever it is, security and protection is always important, but you can't give that security and protection if it comes at the cost of people just being able to speak in any form or fashion, even if we don't like it, right? So anyway, I'll get off that. Let's get to the big sad story of the day. Speaking of free speech, TikTok. So TikTok was going through the Court of Appeals trying to stop itself from getting banned, essentially saying, hey, I know you think that we are connected to the Chinese government somehow, or we're sharing that data with the Chinese government, even though we keep saying we're not, and even though the evidence that they are is still somehow classified. So to be clear, no one knows what the actual evidence is that has been used to ban TikTok, which on the one hand you go, national security this, national security that. We got to protect ourselves. Yeah, absolutely. And we have one of the largest social media platforms about to be banned from the country, as in the U.S. won't even, apparently, as a U.S. citizen, you're not supposed to be able to use it, right? That's pretty extreme for not knowing actually why and not actually seeing the evidence why. But let's jump into this a little more. So to paraphrase one of the judges in this case, says the national security justification was deemed to outweigh First Amendment concerns. Just like what I talked about with what's going on in Australia, what is going on with the Child Protection Act in the States, there is this constant narrative of, yeah, this is a problem with it's limiting free speech, but whatever comes after but doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So essentially what we have here is TikTok saying, hey, you're violating the First Amendment because you're saying your citizens can't use our platform to speak. And that would be correct, right? Like that, I'm failing to understand how it's okay for a government to say you can't use this platform. And if you know anything about crypto, then you know the U.S. has already stopped U.S. citizens from investing in different cryptocurrencies and projects. I won't get into that. So there is precedent for this, unfortunately. But essentially, even though this is a free speech problem, the judges in the case are saying, yeah, but national security is more important. Again, national security over something that we have not seen. I think it would be a lot easier if whatever evidence that they have or they collected was actually shared in some form or capacity. So at least as a citizen, you go, oh, okay, it actually is being used as a weapon, or it is being used inappropriately. But I think the real problem, and the reason that they can't do that, is because TikTok essentially does the same things that other social media platforms do when it comes to data collection, choosing what stories they like, and then potentially sharing that data with government agencies, or listening to government agencies when they say not to allow a story to spread too far. And so this is just one of the things of, we're allowed to do it because we're the US government, or we're allowed to do it because our tech company started in the US, but you're not allowed to do it because you're a foreign entity, or you're not allowed to do it because your tech platform wasn't founded in the States. And so I think there is a very easy way. We already have laws and regulations that if a company or organization is deemed to be a foreign agent, then they have to register as such, right? Like, we already have things in place where, hey, if you happen to be a media company and you represent a foreign government and you're not independent, then there's already regulations where you have to register as I forget what exactly it's called, but essentially you register as a foreign agent, right? And then you have to include that in your terms of service or on your site or something like that. And then we're allowed to read it. So even though that seems like a very easy and logical conclusion to this, for whatever reason, that evidence is enough to just try and ban TikTok outright and then tell U.S. citizens that they're not allowed to use the platform. And while I think it's one thing to ban a company, or like Canada did, say, hey guys, you got to leave the country. And, Canada's actually asked TikTok to leave all of its corporate offices that it has in Canada. I think that's one thing, but then it's another to turn around and say, hey, citizens, you can't use this platform at all. I think that is going to be another lawsuit that comes about after TikTok is gone. Now, I did want to quickly scroll down here and add a note because incoming President Trump was asked about this on a Meet the Press interview. And you can pause if you want to read the whole quote. I'm just going to read the end. And he said, because, he kind of goes off and then he comes back. In other words, they have the right to ban it if you can prove that Chinese companies own it. That's what the judge actually said, which was a little confusing because I thought it was already proved, but maybe not. But the first part is more interesting. But I will say this, if you do that, something else is going to come along and take its place. And so this is a direct quote from him. And I think that's a very valid point, because it kind of goes back to the question I skipped over here. Do we have a better alternative to TikTok? Like, those people who are on TikTok who have built a business or following or creative, do they have a better option? The answer is no, they don't. TikTok has a lot of, I don't personally use it, they do have a lot of great creator tools, especially when it comes to, setting up your own store, shopping and affiliates and all that fun stuff. It has the engagement, and I can see on YouTube how certain niches have changed as a result of TikTok coming around. And that's why we have YouTube Shorts. That's why we have Reels, right? Everyone is trying to copy them. And so I think this ban is, in fact, going to go through. There has been some rumors that as soon as he's in office, President-elect Trump's going to try and stop it somehow because he has some friends who are invested in it. He did try and get TikTok to sell to a US-based company so that the servers were here to kind of expunge the concern over where the data was being shared. Of course, that didn't work out. It fell through, especially since he had to leave office. But sadly, it does look like that TikTok really is on its way out, and there's nothing right now that's stopping it from just being banned come January 19th. Now for some lighter news that's actually going to help us, especially if you have to find an alternative to TikTok, we have Instagram. So Instagram has this cool new feature where you can do trial reels. And so essentially what you can do is you can create your reel, and then eventually you'll have this option, as you can see here, called trial. And I should mention this is not by AI. This is directly from Instagram. I should fix that. And then your reels will be shown to people who aren't your followers. So I think this is really cool. This is a quick and easy way to see how your reel is going to perform. I am a little curious as to how they're going to do this or what audiences are going to see the reel. But if you've ever wanted to try and figure out, hey, how do I make a reel go further than just my followers, then I think this is a cool, awesome tool. Do I think it's going to be better than just simply posting a normal reel and seeing how it does? Probably not, because I don't think most of us have so much content that we're like, we don't want to inundate people too much with like split testing our reels. But I do think this is a cool thing. It's a step in the right direction. Very similar to how YouTube now allows you to upload up to 3 thumbnails, and they're kind of going to rotate them for you, so you don't have to use something like TubeBuddy anymore to try and figure out which thumbnails are performing. So I think this is a really, really cool tool. I just hope that it actually sticks around and it's not like so many features that just come and go so very quickly. Now for our last story here, I know this has been a long one, we have X. So X has decided they're going to change their content creator funding and program again, for lack of a better term. There's a better way to say that. So essentially they've changed their monetization rules that instead of having 500 followers and 500 verified followers and then 5 million impressions over 3 months to 5 million impressions over 3 months and 2,000 verified followers, which is essentially 2,000 people who are subscribed to X. And this is just kind of crushing creators' dreams. I'll get to probably why they did this in a moment. But you can I went ahead and just grabbed using Gronk, I went ahead and grabbed a couple of the comments here. And as you can see, people aren't happy, especially since apparently up until this point, it took a really long time to actually be approved. But X has come out and said, hey, everyone who is backed up in our approval pipeline, we have seen your application and we've either approved or not approved. And now that every single backlog has been filled, moving forward, this is going to be the new requirement, which I think is incredibly hard to hit. And I think it would be a lot more reasonable if those followers didn't have to be paid. But because of the way X has changed its monetization, they have to do this, right? Like X can't afford to pay people for followers who aren't paying X. Because it's a giant revenue sharing scheme, just like every other social platform creator fund out there. And no, I don't think this is going to beat YouTube anytime soon. And so here's what I think is really going on here. X is looking at the 80-20 principle. 20% of the creators on X generate 80% of the ad revenue, generate 80% of the engagement. And so they're looking at it and saying, hey, why don't we just give the 20% more money? So number one, they stay. That's number one. They need people to stay. Number two, they'll be happier. And then number three, they might actually commit more to X because of how much they're making. I remember, I should have screenshotted it for you, but there were some journalists who, when things changed from sharing ad revenue to the creator fund, she made like $11K in a month or something like that. And I went to her profile and it was all news. She tweets a lot, like full-time job plus then, right? But what was interesting though is to look at it and say, if someone is really committed to X and they're getting, 11K per month, which even for a YouTube channel is quite a bit, right? That's a lot of views and engagement. Then all of a sudden that person's probably going to be more loyal. And so this is just looking at it, X looking at it and saying, hey, let's just focus on the top 20% of the people who are driving 80% of our engagement and our results, reward them, and not have them share revenue with all these smaller channels. And that's the problem with a creator fund, because $1 to a big creator is $1 less to a small creator, and the other way around. If you could pay a big creator an extra 1,000 a month, or you could take that 1,000 and spread it across 500 small creators. Even though the second option is altruistic, the first one's going to be a lot more practical from a business standpoint. I mean, he's the richest man in the world for a reason. He knows that that $1,000 is going to make a bigger difference with that one person who's driving a lot of traffic and therefore revenue, versus spreading it across a bunch of smaller creators who are going to get like $5 or $10 and go, oh, okay, that's nice. Versus giving one person 1,000 and they go from 10 to 11, all of a sudden they might be more interested in investing more into X. And of course, that means more content for X, which means more engagement for X, hypothetically. And so the cycle just continues. So this is really stinky for small, this sucks for small creators, right? Like if you were trying to grow on X, I know we were looking at it going, oh, I don't know, like how long would it take to get 500 verified? But now that it's 2,000, it's also forcing people to choose a platform, which I also don't like. But long story short, if you really want to get monetized on X, X is saying, yeah, once you make it, it's going to be fun. But you're in for like at least 3 or 4 years of really hard work. Like I know of a lot of creators in the entrepreneur, like solopreneur niche, who have been posting for half a decade and they would not qualify, right? So I think X is just experimenting, trying to figure out. And I think number one, they just figured out they have to keep the current people who are driving engagement on the platform and happy. And once they've got those people, they feel like they've got those people locked in or have got the user base and growth that they need, then they might relook at it and go, okay, what can we do for small creators? But for now, they're just focused on revenue, making sure X is profitable and keeping those big creators on the platform. So long story short, X is kind of crushing small creators' dreams. So thank you so much for watching. Sincerely hope you enjoyed the new format. I am trying to go a little more in depth with the stories, and hopefully you like the new kind of graphic style as well. I'm just trying to figure out how do I get these done a little more efficiently so I can actually do more of them, because I do enjoy talking to you guys about these kinds of stories and things. It's just sometimes when it takes 40 or 50 minutes to make a graphic, then it kind of loses its luster. So do comment below if you actually made it to the end, because I know there's like 3 or 4 people that actually make it all the way, especially since this video wound up being a really long episode. So hit that like button, subscribe for more news and updates just like this. And funnel tutorials are finally on the way starting next week. And until then, keep building the business you love.